Hey everyone, welcome to Get Freight to It. I'm your host, Chris Arredondo, co-founder and head of pretty much everything customer related here at Cargo Chief. In our podcast and upcoming episodes, you'll hear from not just our partners and TMS companies, but also insight and brief discussions with some of our customers here at the Chief, covering unique topics in the logistics industry, from slinging freight, strategy, tips and tricks, new integrations coming from your favorite TMSs. You name it, we'll talk about it. So join us every Wednesday as we sit in and get freight to it. So for those that haven't heard of Cargo Chief, we're a freight tech company that solves some of the industry's biggest issues, not just when it comes to capacity, but really sporadic capacity, and not just rating, but the inaccuracies and volatility of the market that we've kind of all come face to face with, especially these days. And as holidays like Independence Day come about us, rates change and we have no idea in which direction. And how we do that is through a project and procurement software called C4. So if you're looking to expand your carrier base, book more freight, or just kind of want a better way to price your freight, we should probably talk. Today, we've got Scott Steele with us, Vice President and Head of Operations over there at HTS Logistics. We'll be getting into some kind of rather unique topics today, and really called like a digital capacity team, how that came about, what makes it useful, and how it fits into not just a traditional model, but also hearing how like an assembly line type model could move the needle for your company. Scott, this is our 4th episode, so we've officially been alive for a whole month. Glad to have you on today.
Chris, I'm honored to be here. I'm slightly offended it took 4 episodes to get me on, but we'll top 10, top 5.
Yeah. If you like a good movie reference from Jingle All the Way, you're my number one customer. I don't know. Every time I love that. I love that point. No, hey, at least we're on, right? We made it.
It's thrilled to be here.
Absolutely. So we actually met there at a McLeod user conference in Dallas, I want to say, where we started to kind of talk about how your company was growing rapidly. You really needed a way to scale without interrupting the way that you guys do business. We kicked off our integration with you guys there in McLeod at the end of last year. And we've seen some fairly large pivotal points, I'd say, in supporting your business, and fantastic things that I've never seen, and just through my career. So I think if you're a brokerage listening in and you're looking to scale, or really considering moving into more digital sense of brokerage with as little friction as possible, then stick around. So let's GFTI. I'm going to throw that acronym out there, get freight to it, see if it sticks and see what happens. I don't know. So Scott, before we came out there, what was it, like 2 weeks now? And saw you guys over in Jacksonville.
Yeah, it's been a couple of weeks.
Yeah. So some of the big things you were looking for before then was kind of like that CRM for carrier management. I mean, a way to scale without creating more work. You guys have a very, very distinct setup with what seems kind of like it starts with a digital capacity team, and it works its way down more like an assembly line, since a lot of automation happens much quicker than someone can call a carrier. And so I guess to that point, what is that digital capacity team? Like, how does it work with your procurement side? I mean, kind of, I guess, what sort of value do you look for, and what do you see that whole assembly line model bringing? What type of value do you see there?
Yeah, so kind of need to, I guess, maybe pick that apart a little bit. That the assembly line started as we began to really evaluate. I mean, quite frankly, the margin retention, on transactions based against the time, the time of booking versus the time of shipping, and wanted to be more thoughtful and more intentional in how we could start to increase pre-books. And so it started with that. And so we started to really look at the measurements, and then we said, hey, we really could probably take this even further. Instead of getting locked in the same day all the time, let's take a portion of our team and shift them out one day in it, just 24 hours in advance. Yeah. And then the 24 became 24 to 48 hours. That was, very positive. I mean, we improved our pre-book percentage, fairly significantly, 10, 15%, probably by doing that. And so then the next iteration of that was, okay, well, we need to probably get a little bit different with our sale to the carrier, like are a little bit different with our pitch. We then look to really start to do some procurement activities and really improve our carrier outreach, our campaigning program. Like, how can we go out and get in front of the carriers and say, hey, make sure that they understand what we have from, from an offering, as opposed to what it is that they may see as we pass each other in the night. Right. So that led us to as we outreach carriers and we campaign to carriers, we said, hey, not every carrier wants to communicate with us the exact same way. And we need to be intentional and specific with carriers about how they want to transact, right? Like, I mean, we used to, send rate confirmations via fax machines, right? So, well, yeah, we did. We actually did.
Yeah.
So then we started to become intentional about identifying email traffic and trying to build a capacity team, like legitimately specifically around emails.
Yeah.
And, to this point now, we have a team of dispatchers that they don't have a phone on their desk. They're not using traditional load boards. They really are, sending and receiving emails.
So it started kind of with like time and how you guys look at time compared to next to your freight mix and your carry mix, and how kind of things were working in the beginning. So then you're able to address like time, because I think you guys talk about like T -2, -3, -1 or something like that, like in your shop, and then how that fits with your carrier mix and how they're engaging with you, and then what you can do to kind of like evolve that whole thing. I get the whole it's like it's bizarre, like the technology these days. It's like it's there, but man, some people are still like printing out 30 pages of a carrier packet, filling it out, and like, hey, did you get my fax yet? Oh no, yeah, it's on page 3 of 30 right now. It'll come in eventually. It's like that stuff it's still there. And I think, it's just kind of, it tells the story a little bit too of like why a digital capacity team is important, and like what do you need to do to kind of like strip away some of the things, like you said, like taking away a phone, or not necessarily taking it away, but just there's so, like when we were there's so much traffic coming into an inbox. It's like, how do you manage all that when it's all it's all good messages, right? And like good priority, and it's all information about your freight. And it's like, so you took this digital capacity team, put it in front to then like address your T-1. Next, you kind of like pass it on to like a T-2 team, or like, I think you guys call it a futures team or advanced team.
Yep.
So then once that capacity team gets that information, they pass it on to the futures team, and then they pass it on to the pre-book side. Can you tell us a little bit more like that assembly line model, and like how what do you look at, like when you're, I don't know if there are KPIs around that, but like, I mean, today people just think of like booking loads and that's the KPI, but curious, like what do you look at to make those gears move, and how that process works?
Yeah. So good question. So I mean, traditionally your measurements for the performance on a brokerage team they're going to be calls. They're going to be how many calls are you taking inbound, how many calls are you getting outbound per load, and they're going to be books. Like when you're measuring the performance of a dispatcher, like either you book loads today or you didn't book loads today. And if you didn't book loads, let's look at your calls, and did you at least try to book loads for the phone calls? But when you start to move towards a more digital program, a more digital messaging, more digital way of communicating with carriers, like you lose the phone call metrics. But one of the things that early on we really tried to start to put our arms around was this concept of a carrier offer. And a carrier offer was like, it kind of spun out of like in math class, show your work, right? Like show your work. Like let's in the beginning, like let's capture the conversations that we're having with carriers, just simple notes in the system. And even if you get objections, like let's understand what the objections are. I mean, every one of those transactions with a carrier is a piece of information about the carrier's behavior, about the carrier's likes and their dislikes, and quite frankly, about the freight and our freight against, our competitors' freight or our competition's freight. And so we started to capture the carrier interactions and as carrier offers, like we called, we pitched, we emailed, we pitched. And so then the next thing becomes, ultimately what you want to get to in any sales transaction is a price conversation. You want to get to the negotiation conversation, because then you're at least close. You know that you have an interested party on the other end, that they're receptive to what it is that you have to offer. So then you want to get to, a price line negotiation. You want to get to a negotiating point. So then the next evolution of carrier offers became quality carrier offers, so that we could capture those carrier offers. And then we were recording price negotiations with carriers and start to understand, like, okay, what is going to be the market clearing price. And so as we started to be more thoughtful about how many capacity resources we use from a time of shipping perspective. So then we really started to, on the procurement side and on the digital side, like really drive carrier offers, drive quality offers. The more information, the more, if we have a list of, carrier A wanted $5,400, carrier B wanted 57, carrier C wanted 68. Like, you get to a point where it makes you have enough recordable information that it makes it easier is not the right word, but it makes it easier. I mean, those things are going to move to kind of a central, they're going to roughly, the market it's of all the individual players, the market ultimately kind of drives to a clearing price. And when you have the more of those interactions with carriers you have about price, the more confident you can be in knowing that this is the market clearing price for this transaction. Take the truck, move on to the next one.
Yeah, that take decision, I think, is what a lot of people call it. And it's
precisely.
Yeah. So it's like you got to a point of like getting those quality offers and a point of negotiation, and then what you kind of evolved from there. So like there's a lot of work in getting that first part of the puzzle. So I think like you can find ways to do that, and how you guys have done it is just with that digital capacity team. That was really like what came about was this getting those quality offers, screening them, vetting them, knowing how to repeat that over and over again to get there every time. Maybe not every time, but more so than not. So rather than banging your head against the wall or calling 60 carriers every day on the same load. So it's like you can streamline those ways, or try to get to that first point, that point of negotiation. Everything thereafter, like, you can start to put them into the right group, the procurement team. If you're on a backhaul principle and you have like regions, Midwest, Southeast, whatever, you can start to position those carriers in the right group so they can go and harvest that relationship and start to move the needle. And it kind of leads us into the next thing of like the way that you guys weigh quality over anything. It's like that was the first benchmark, right? Like that was what you wanted to do. You had to like get quality first. And it's like, historically, the only way to really drive that quality was like an intensive labor commitment on that procurement side. And it was kind of backwards. And we see all sorts of brokers, right? Like they go and they make all those phone calls, and just to end up getting one quality carrier and then never working with them again. It's like that's, you really got to look at carrier retention and try to figure out how to like work with those carriers repeatedly. And since you guys there at HTS, like, kind of talked about this a little bit, but what do y'all do to identify quality? Like, and what does that mean to your business? Like, do you try to just get as many quality options as possible? Or is it just like, do you just look at a carrier interest? Like, how do you say that's quality?
Well, so for us, I mean, with the offer perspective, that the quality just means like the carrier offer, it's a touch, right? And so if you've touched, and that's an offer. But ultimately, as it's all about, transactions are all about driving to a market clearing price. They're all about having a negotiation, a point of negotiation, and then you're 90% of the way there, right? You've got an interested party. You're both talking about price, and whether you can close the deal or you can't close the deal. And so really the big difference for us from a quality perspective is just, are you driving to a conversation about price? Have you touched the right carrier, and you've gotten close enough from an interest perspective that we're talking about price? And then if we're talking about price, that's quality. And so that matters specifically when you have, if you think about, entry level dispatchers or people who are kind of beginning out, like you kind of got it. You got to roadmap the negotiation a little bit. You got to roadmap the transaction set for them a little bit. And so, okay, first it starts with phone calls and you're talking to carriers. Then you're talking to carriers and you're rolling over on their excuse why it is that they won't do the load.
Yeah.
But then the next step in that is that you have to get to a price conversation. And so it's just trying to like breadcrumb or chunk up the transaction into its integral parts. That's the reason why we said, okay, well, here's an offer. But then there's a difference between recording schedule's no good, they won't take the load, to then like, okay, the schedule isn't ideal, but they would do the load for $1,750. And so we wanted to like encourage our users to like understand the difference between, talking to a truck, but then really talking to a truck, but then actually really talking to a truck, right?
Yeah.
Really getting close to being able to, to send that rate confirmation.
Yeah. And it's like setting the stage, like just making it a lot easier, I think, is kind of what like the digitization has done for you guys, like making those conversations come maybe not organically, like building that carrier relationship organically, but just like through awareness and maybe just like repetition, like your team has gotten accustomed to how to navigate an inbox and how to like pick the quality ones out of, a slew of 800 emails, picking the quality ones over just like being proactive and calling a carrier. So it's like there's difference there, right? So
there is. And look, I think that when you get to a digital dispatch team and you can start to really be mindful about automating and like expanding your outreach program, like when you can start to automate that initial, like I've sent it, you've put it in front of a carrier, so you've talked to a carrier, and then when a carrier responds and gives you feedback about the price, like that's allowed us to go so much farther out with our freight, that again, it's about like, ultimately it's about making sure you're taking the right truck and taking the right truck at the right price, right? So as you can automate some of that stuff and you can move it out into the future, you can capture the interest of carriers that much farther out. And as you automate that, like you can understand how many carriers you're putting that in front of, how many carriers are coming back to you with the basic, I don't have the truck there, denial, or but then you can also like, you can capture that price negotiation, which again, that's 90% of the way there, right?
Yeah.
If you can automate that, then that allows you to, instead of having your team focused on, you got to make the phone calls so that you can get the offers, because the offers lead to the quality offers. You can then have your team step back and say, oh, now let's be really mindful of, okay, these loads have now been out there for 72 hours. And this load has 17 quality offers that you can see what the market clearing price is. This load's been out there for the same amount of time and it may not have as many offers. Like, okay, so then you can apply your resources more mindfully to say, we're not drawing a lot of, we better really start to beat the drum on this, or what creative solutions do we have? Because clearly the carrier interest isn't naturally there. So we're going to have to drum some up.
And that's where that's
so critical to have the insight.
Yeah.
That's so critical.
Yeah. And that's kind of where the opportunity cost comes in. It's like, do you spend your team's resources like emailing carriers individually, working on that first leg of approach, or do you like try to find ways that are maybe a soft ROI or not, but like saves you time to where you can have the bandwidth to address the right people and execute, right? So it's
yeah, for sure. And the thing, when you start down this path, like, if you historically or traditionally, it was, let's post our loads up and we'll field inbound calls. And at the end of the day, the bricks were the bricks because they were the ones that were left on the board at the end of the day, right? But like once you really start down the path of using data and seeing and starting to really monitor behaviors and having insight, like it's like dawn breaking, right? And you have a little bit more light and a little bit more light, and like it's so contagious once you really start down the path of really being able to understand the habits of your key carriers and your key, and the nature of the freight and the interest in being able to really measure it instead of like, you think you knew, like, oh, it's hard to articulate it, unfortunately.
It's really like education, right? Like your team starts to get smarter overnight, and it's like without having to read a book, like, because the technology, like us as tech providers, like, I say this a lot, like all TMSs and everybody has data. It just depends on how you interpret it. Like the interpretation of that data is what's really going to move the needle. And like having all that information and insight into an area where your team can like use it and it's actionable, and like they themselves have a better day, right? It's not so chaotic. It's kind of putting order to the chaos. And that's what a lot of things miss. So it's good to hear, you guys on your end, how y'all are kind of moving and evolving with, not necessarily just automation, but digitization and just like a new way of booking freight. Like I never thought an assembly line model. I never even thought about it, right? I just, because it's never been there. There's never been tools in place to make it work like that. So, I appreciate you, Scott. Again, thanks for joining us today. I forgot to ask while I was there if you were listed in the yellow pages or not. I don't know, but if not, how can people connect with you, maybe to hear more about kind of this way of booking freight, or if there are any shippers out there wanting to hear more about like your asset solutions or anything? How should they connect with you on LinkedIn or what?
Yeah, I mean, fairly traditional, right? We've got our website, HTSlogistics.com. There's, I'm there, my contact information is there on the website. If it's a shipper who wants us to move their freight, they can call my cell phone, 904-248-2873.
There we go. We'll put it all over everything that we can to make sure it's out there. So thanks everyone again for listening into our 4th episode of Get Freight to It. And again, automation doesn't have to be the goal. Process improvement can be as simple as, beefing up your procurement scope or improving your model with more of like, let's call it an assembly line. So tune in every Wednesday to get the inside scoop of what's going on. And till then, connect with us, Cargo Chief on LinkedIn, or visit us at cargochief.com. See you next time.